The crowd parted as Laine filled in the gap between the merging bodies, heading towards the dais. She slipped into a muddy pit on her way, and the mud covered her woman form. She walked slowly. She smelled of dung. Even so, the sun stole away every shadow of concern or deceit. Bird chatter filled the air with the coming of the dawn. Again, the biodiversity amazed her. If this wasn't heaven, she didn't know what was. But then again, every place had its problems, most of them caused by human nature. Man's greed, his selfishness, his willingness to exploit people, land, and animals for profit, taking them from their land of ease, so others must rebuild it. She stood in front of a shrub overcome with flowers, and a butterfly flew out. Thankfully, the oversized t-shirt fell to Laine's knees. She didn't have to have an episode like when Dad left the shower in the presence of guests and used the little dog to cover himself. He sure was a funny guy despite his other weaknesses. Though Laine wasn't physically naked, it felt like it. To fully expose the truth of who she was and where she came from, and claim that it didn't have to define her. Some voice spoke in Laine's mind. It was that guided meditation again, this time a Christian one. Put on new clothes, step into the truth of who you are. There is no longer Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male or female, animal or human, because you are all one. Laine thought, resiliency and appreciation came from seeing the good, even in bad things. Think about what's good about what's bad, and you will always find something. She felt the baseball cap on her head. She lifted her arms, and the oversized t-shirt hem dropped just below her knees. Mom's artist friend Sean Moore had made it. It was a stencil drawing of a centaur. It was all slicked down with mud and water now, and she could barely see the words underneath. Are you sleepwalking? She felt the top of her head and took the cap off, smiling when she realized it was her new order band cap with the flowers on it she'd lost somewhere in Ireland. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about this. And what do you know? She shimmied them on and limped towards the center stage against the pain she felt in her foot, straightening the folds as she went and feeling so comfortably modern. As she reached the dais, Remus tried to grab at her, but she escaped him, and he looked down at her. No, she said, for the first time in so long. She'd forgotten how strange the human voice sounded. She stood for a whole minute with her arms outstretched in front of her, turning her wrists out as the sun came up. So many people were looking at her, and she kept reminding herself she wasn't naked. How was it that only she was realizing the power of her voice, and that it scared her a little in its might? We all have the ability to transform ourselves, she said. Because I'm creative, I will create this new order with all the other creators. Everyone was gaping, but one guy did manage to interject. Oh, I'm really scared. Here comes the eco-mafia. Shut it, someone else said. This is important. Everyone was bewitched by the magic of her transformation. None the least herself. Maybe when it's your time to shine, not even the devil himself can stand against you. Maybe it was luck, or maybe it was preparation, meeting opportunity. But anyway, she could feel her wheels spinning at an unstoppable rate this time. She moved behind the limestone pillar, which seemed best for giving speeches. For a limited time, the attention was hers. Her imagination and stories were her godsend through difficult times. But now they were here to inspire others. Either way, she was determined and adamant to show who she now was. Every sheep has her day. On stage, Laine looked up. She saw the first gleam of sun spying through the trees, making the tiny clay faces shimmer on the trees. Children ran underneath them, but stopped when they saw her. She stood in the partial shade of the umbrella-like acacia and could smell the scent of the olive trees. If Remus wins the fight over his brother, it will be called the Reman Empire. And that just doesn't sound right, she said, clearing her throat. They looked at her funny, tilting their heads. They were starting to catch her energy, which seemed to radiate out of her, brighter than anything and not dependent on anything. It was the sun setting fire to the trees until they seemed to glow within. The truth is like a furnace burning warm as you rest next to it, gazing at the multitude of sparks flying from it as a chiseled iron sharpens into a point. This fire burns away all falsehoods and warms you from the inside. She held her hand against the brightening sun. It was getting so light now. She felt almost dizzy, but not alone. It was like she had an invisible army of her ancestors fighting behind her, beside her, to heal the patterns that had hindered them throughout the generations. They were speaking through her because she had no idea how these strange words were coming out from her. Each cosmic thread catches the light of the sun, connecting into a spiderweb of oneness. Our lives are bigger than our own, and everything we do directs the sway of the planet. She squinted at the dim crease of the mountains, and then she looked down. She saw Romulus in the crowd. Now he was the one smiling at her. She felt her energy reflected back to her. Somehow Romulus knew her on sight as a woman, as he'd known her as a sheep. And she thought very few people would recognize both versions of her and think her the same person. Yet her heart had not changed, and he could see beyond whatever body caged her soul. And she could speak to him without words, telling him to get up there. The person who will lead you into the future is among you today. He is a simple shepherd boy. He has spent his life tending his flock and dreaming about a city none but he could see. His name is Romulus, and he is the real chosen leader who the prophecy speaks about. Thanks for watching my video, guys. I'll be back with another video next Wednesday. Until then, ciao!